This presentation discusses monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition is a market situation in which a large number of firms produce similar but not identical products. Entry into the industry is relatively easy. Characteristics include a significant number of sellers and a highly competitive market, differentiated products, and using sales, promotion, and advertising, and an easy entry of new firms in the long run. Some of the implications for large numbers of firms include small market share, lack of collusion, and independence. Product differentiation is just the distinguishing of products by brand name, color, and other minor attributes. For example, Colgate and Crest distinguish from each other with different brand names, and by suggesting that one or the other is better at whitening your teeth or healthier. So, how product differentiation and price work in monopolistic competition? First, the firm has some control over the price it charges. Unlike a perfect competitor, the firm faces a downward sloping demand curve. So consider the abundance of brand names for many products. The more successful the firm is at differentiation, the more control it has over price. Think about how well Apple has differentiated itself and how much it can charge relative to other computers. In advertising, we can consider a perfect competitor. Would they have any reason to advertise? Would a monopolistically competitive firm advertise? Can advertising lead to efficiency? We wouldn't expect a perfect competitor to advertise because there's no differentiation between their products and the products of the next firm. However, in monopolistic competition, sales, promotion, and advertising can increase demand for a firm, can differentiate a firm's product, and can result in increased profits. So how should we decide how much advertising to do? We should advertise until the additional revenue from one more dollar of advertising just equals that $1 of additional cost. Ease of entry into the market is an important consideration for a monopolistic competitor. Competition is always lurking in the background, so the easier it is for them to enter the market, the more a current competitor has to worry about losing business to incoming competitors. The individual firm's demand and cost curves. As we've said, the demand curve slopes downward. And again, profit is maximized where marginal cost intersects marginal revenue from below. In the short run, a monopolistic competitor can make economic profits. They can also experience economic losses. However, in the long run, we can expect zero economic profits, similar to perfect competition. The rate of return will tend toward normal. Economic profits will tend toward zero. So many firms produce substitutes that any economic profits will disappear with competition. We can expect that new firms will enter and exit until economic profit is roughly zero. In panel A here, we can see graphically a similar result where we calculate economic profits. Again, with the downward sloping demand curve, we have marginal revenue equal to marginal costs, and this is the quantity that we produce at, so that average total costs are equivalent here, and our price is set here, which is our average revenue. And the difference between the average revenue and average cost is the profit per unit, so the profit per unit times the total quantity is our total profit. Similarly, here's an economic loss situation. Again, we're producing where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. However, our average total costs are higher than our demand curve or our average revenue curve. And so we experience a loss per unit here multiplied by the quantity sold here to get our total loss. In the long run equilibrium, however, things shift so that where marginal cost and marginal revenue are equivalent, we're producing at the point where average total costs and average revenue are equivalent, and so our economic profit is equal to zero. The key difference between a monopolistic competitor and a perfect competitor is the perfect elasticity of the demand curve for the perfect competitor. Here we can see it graphically with the perfectly flat or perfectly elastic demand curve for the perfect competition market, and then the downward slope demand curve for the monopolistic competition market. These different demand curves result in the fact that in perfect competition, the long-run equilibrium occurs where average total cost is minimized, but this isn't the case for monopolistic competition. Well, some argue that this is not necessarily a waste of resources as the added cost arises from product differentiation. Chamberlain argued that it's rational for consumers to have a taste for differentiation, that is, consumers willingly accept the resultant increased production costs in return for more choice and variety of output. For instance, a lot of firms regard their brand names as highly valuable because differentness is valued by consumers. Direct marketing. This is advertising targeted at specific consumers via email and regular mail. Mass marketing. Advertising intended to reach as many customers as possible via radio, TV, and newspaper. The ultimate mass marketing would be something like a Super Bowl ad. Interactive marketing. Advertising that permits a consumer to follow up directly by searching for more information. A search good is a product with characteristics that enable an individual to evaluate the product's quality in advance of a purchase. Experience goods are products that an individual must consume before the product's quality can be established. And credence goods are a product with qualities that consumers lack the expertise to assess without assistance. Examples of search goods would be something like clothing and music evaluated prior to the purchase. Examples of experience good would be different foods, soft drinks, restaurants, movies, vacations. And examples of credence goods would be healthcare or legal advice. Informational advertising emphasizes transmitting knowledge about the features of a product. Persuasive advertising is intended to induce the consumer to purchase a particular product and discover a previously unknown taste for an item. Advertising as a signaling behavior. Individual companies can explicitly engage in signaling behavior. They do so by establishing brand names or trademarks and promoting them. Let's consider what would happen if the government banned persuasive advertising. While informational advertising is informative to buyers of search goods, informational advertising may not be very useful for buyers of experience goods or credence goods. Even a firm's expenditures on persuasive advertising communicate some information, such as their intention to continue operating, and so any attempt to restrict the amount of advertising would presumably reduce the informational benefits to society. Let's consider a category of product with a very unique cost structure. Information products, such as computer operating systems, software, and digital music and videos, have high fixed costs for development, but the marginal cost of producing a copy is very low. That is, it takes a long time to code for an operating system or something of that sort. However, copying the code over to a new disk is relatively cheap. An information product is an item that is produced using information-intensive inputs at a relatively high fixed cost, but distributed for sale at a relatively low marginal cost. Here's a graph of the average total cost, the average fixed cost, and the marginal cost or the average variable cost of an information product. We can see that if we're only producing and selling one product, then the cost is very high per unit. However, if we're producing a really large number of those products, then we can distribute the high fixed cost across a large number of products, and so the average total cost isn't significantly higher than the marginal cost or the average variable cost. Short-run economies of operation. This is a distinguishing characteristic of an information product arising from declining short-run average total cost as more units of the product are sold. Let's consider a computer game manufacturer in a monopolistically competitive market. In monopolistic competition, marginal cost pricing will result in a loss for the firm despite the fact that it's still efficient for the economy as a whole. Providing an information product entails incurring relatively high fixed costs but a relatively low per unit cost for additional units of output. So the average total cost for a firm that sells an information product slopes downward, meaning the firm experiences short-run economies of operation. However, in the long run, monopolistically competitive equilibrium, price adjusts to equal average total cost, the firm earns sufficient revenues to cover total costs, including the opportunity cost of capital. Consumers thereby pay the lowest price necessary to induce sellers to provide the item. Here we can see this graphically. Here we can see in panel A that if we produced at the price and quantity combination where price is equal to marginal cost or average variable cost, we would have a price significantly lower than our average total cost and we would experience an economic loss. However, if we produce at the point where marginal revenue intersects with marginal cost, we again minimize our losses or maximize our profits. And so we'll end up at the higher price. In this case, economic profit is zero. The following are a couple of examples of advertising's effects on profits. Dan Chung, a software engineer, developed and sold Spork and received roughly 100,000 downloads. Later, a competing app, Food Spotting, had more marketing funds and advertising and ended up with 4 million downloads. Because of the lower advertising, the Spork app never had enough downloads to generate sufficient revenue, and so Chung had to leave the market.